What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative, a channel I created to have a place to talk about all of the things that I read. The Nerdy Narrative channel has a new top tier patron, Gail. Your support along with the other patrons are what allows me to keep this channel going and keep adding services and things, so thank you so very much. I do have an idea for something I want to do in the future with Patreon money. I'm checking into some things first to make sure it's allowed, and once I get that information and I know that I can move forward with it, I'll be announcing that. So more on that in the future, I hope. And while we're talking about the channel, a couple of videos that I had go up this week, if you missed them, on Monday I did the mid-year book freakout tag for this year. I got that up and going. That was so much fun. It's such a great way to recap the first half of the year so far. On Wednesday, my May monthly wrap-up went up, and that was just a quick recap of everything that I read in May, just a couple of thoughts on how I felt about it, and my favorite read of the month. Looking ahead to next week, I will have a review go up where we talk about my review cart. So I have this book cart, and I call it my review cart because it contains all of the physical books that are on my TBR to read and review over the coming months. And I thought it would be fun just to give you guys a brief tour of what I've accepted and what you can look forward to seeing in the coming months. Now, as far as what I read this week, let's start with Gwendy's Final Task, the third and final book in the Button Box Trilogy by Richard Chizmar and Stephen King. This book was what I have been looking for the entire trilogy, and I finally got the payoff in book 3. Now, does that mean I think the series is worth reading for that book 3? Well, you're gonna have to wait and find out, because I will be doing a video on the series. I did do a video about the first book in the series, and in that video I said I thought it might be best to just review the series as a whole, and that turned out to be correct. Well, I guess that's a yes and no answer. We'll talk about it more in that upcoming video. But this one gave me what I was looking for as a Dark Tower fan. Now, I did have to suffer through about 20 to 23 chapters of political garbage. I do not like politics in books, because I do not like politics in real life, because people do not tend to have a discussion. They just want to tell you why they're right, and if you don't believe as they do, then they're going to tell you why you were wrong, and it almost always becomes argumentative. It's never a discussion. Like, I don't know why people think they're going to change someone's mind by calling them names because they believe differently, arguing with them. Like, that's not the way, guys. That is not the way. And I'm just tired of getting beat over the head with Stephen King politics. And if he finds a way to slide politics into fairy tale, that will be the last book that I purchase by him, because it has just steadily progressed where it's worse and worse and worse. Now, I am reading a lot of his backlog, and there are mentions, but they're small mentions and usually only once. I can deal with that. But this, I'm telling you, the first 20 chapters is just political jump. But he finally got over it, or maybe Richard Chizmar took over from there. At any rate, after those first 20-something chapters, which they are very short, the rest of the story was fantastic, and I absolutely loved it. Next, I did finish the arc for The Rebel, which is the second book in J.R. Trass's The Elfraver trilogy. I have no idea how this author is going to come up with book 3, because book 2 literally blew my stinking mind. I was speechless at what happened. It was so clever. Now, I do have a tiny little negative, maybe 2. The first 20% of the book felt too long to stay into a training phase. I felt my attention span kind of wavering. I wish it had been condensed a little tiny bit, but when I moved into the meat of the book after that 20%, it tied into that first 20%. It made it important, but still just felt a little bit too long. And then the end was a little bit too long. Like, I think maybe 10% of that I would have slid into book 3, sort of as a bit of a recap maybe. I don't know. I'm not an author. What do I know? The big finale happened, and then we kind of spent a lot of time talking about where all of the characters were. My brain shut down after all of that stuff happened because it was just so mind-melting, everything that happened. And then it just kind of kept going and I was like, you melted my brain back here. I'm not ready for all of this yet. But even so, the book was phenomenal. It's a YA fantasy that just, and this one I would actually say graduated up to a more YA fantasy sci-fi. Two of the main characters are Alina and Cho. Alina was all about the dream magic, and Cho is a human who's had a lot of technological things done to her. She's basically a walking computer. All the technology and things that she can do is so fascinating. It's so cool. It's so unique. I just don't know how J.R. Trask is going to write a book 3. Like, I would not want to try and follow that book up to save my life. It was so good. You know, and that just goes to show you can still have a top tier read and not like a couple of things about it. Like, I felt the beginning was a little too long and I felt the end was a little too long. That was still a 5-star read for me. And well, that'll take care of everything I completed. What am I still working on? Well, I'm so glad you asked. I am still working my way through Richard Thomas's Tribulations collection. I would call these stories, some are horror, but others I would call speculative fiction. They make you think. They may be 3 pages long, but it stays with you because you might have an initial reaction of, okay, this is what was going on. But your brain isn't always happy with that. Richard Thomas has a knack for writing stories that stick with you long after you finish them and put them down. I will think about them sometimes for days, and I'll have all these different theories I'll explore as far as what could have possibly been meant by it or happened, or perhaps how it could continue forward. I love what his writing does for my imagination. Just absolutely love it. He is one of my favorite short story writers. Hands down, just top tier for me. Another collection that I'm working on as part of an unofficial read along with my friend Evie from the channel She Was Only Evie. We're working on Zora Neale Hurston's The Complete Stories. Now, what we both discovered when we started this collection is most of these stories are included in her other collection, Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick. So it ends up there's only about 7 or 8 stories in here that I have not read, but I got started on them. It's Zora Neale Hurston. Y'all know I'm a huge fangirl for her. I can see no wrong in anything she writes. I just absolutely adore her. I'm so glad to be back in her work. And then finally, on my Kindle, I started Ought to Be Dead by Scott Warren. Now, this is one of 6 books that I will be reading and judging as far as who is going to be the semifinalists that I will present to Bookworm, who will then read it along with all the others picked by our crew, and she will pick a finalist to move forward in the SPFBO 8s. I am so excited to be a part of that. So, Ought to Be Dead. This one is about a guy named Spectre and his human apprentice, Cotton. Spectre accidentally came back to life when a half-asleep necromancer attempts to reanimate the corpse of a ship's inspector. The crew brings him in. She's trying to reanimate him so he can go finish his job, and accidentally brings Spectre to life. Now, there's a little more to Spectre than just being one of the risen, which is apparently a thing in this world. When you're living, you can actually sign a death contract to someone in exchange for money. So when you die, a necromancer can actually reanimate you to be in service to whoever you sold yourself to, which is a fascinating transaction in and of itself. But Spectre and Cotton travel around monster hunting. The monsters are so interesting. The monsters are the most exciting thing about this collection of adventures. There's different abilities and magical things that either happen because of legend or lore or an accident. I have had so much fun reading them. In fact, I read half of the book in one sitting yesterday. I got up this morning, read another 25%. As soon as I get done talking to you guys here, I'm gonna go finish it. So it is safe to say that this one is a hit for me. I can't wait to finish it. And speaking of finishing that one, What am I gonna read next? Well, I'm gonna go right into my second read for SPFBO 8, and that is gonna be The Cradle by Ron Sammy. Can't wait to see where that one's gonna lead me. But guys, that is gonna do it for this week. That's all that I've read, what I'm still reading, and what I plan to jump into next. For those of you participating in the Shelf Space Magical Creatures Readathon, how's your progress going? I completed one prompt already. Gwendy's final task was Cerberus, which is read a book in a trilogy. Ought to Be Dead is another one, so I'll finish that one today. And then I can't remember if The Cradle fit into one. I'm doing really good so far. Let me know in the comments below if you're participating and how many prompts you've completed so far. Guys, thank you so much for watching today. Have a great rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you in the next one.